I'm tired. I can't do this anymore.
Amare! Wait! Don't do it!
No! Please, just let me go!
No! Look at me! Amare, look at me!
Let me go! Please!
I will never let you go! Do you hear me? Never!
There's nothing left for me. Nothing. Everything is gone.
I'm still here, and I promise I'll always be.
Zivion, everything is gone. My parents, my home, my future.
Then hold on to me, Amare. Hold on.
Her fingers were slipping. One more second. Just one more second, and she would be gone. The cold metal of the railing bit into her palms. The water below was black, restless, and waiting. Wind whipped off the bridge and tore through her dress like it was trying to finish what despair had started. Amare's grip was loosening. Her arms were trembling, and somewhere deep in her chest, she had already decided. Then a voice split the darkness. Amare! A hand grabbed hers, strong, desperate, real. She didn't want to be saved, but he didn't give her a choice. That man, that voice was Zivion, and the night he pulled her back from the edge of that bridge was the same night he unknowingly handed her the power to destroy him. Because Amare, the woman he saved, the woman he believed in, the woman he sacrificed everything for, would one day walk away from him like he had never existed at all. This is the story of what love looks like when it's wasted, and what justice looks like when it finally arrives. Zivion and Amare had grown up on the same cracked sidewalks of Surulere, Lagos, a neighborhood that had once been one of the city's proudest addresses and had since been worn down to something rawer, grittier, and more honest. The kind of place that taught its children one thing above all else: survive. They weren't wealthy, they weren't connected, but they had something most people around them didn't: a hunger for more. They met in their final year at the University of Lagos, Akoka. Zivion noticed her first, had not to. Amare had the kind of presence that made a room sit up straighter. She walked like she was already somewhere better. She talked like she had read every book in the library and was quietly unimpressed. She laughed like the world owed her nothing and she had made peace with that. Zivion was quieter, steadier, the kind of man who showed up, who remembered small things, who would walk 40 minutes in the rain rather than let you wait alone. They fell into each other slowly, then all at once. But even as love bloomed between them, Amare's eyes were always on the horizon. She had been researching postgraduate programs in the UK for years, saving application guides on her phone, dog-earing pages about London universities, and calculating living costs on spreadsheets she updated every few months. She had a plan, a real one, and that plan had her leaving Lagos, leaving Nigeria, leaving everything familiar behind. Zivion supported every word of it. He studied her dream like it was his own, helped edit application essays at midnight, and cheered louder than anyone when she got shortlisted. He was proud of her, genuinely, uncomplicatedly proud. She got the acceptance letter on a Thursday morning. They were both crying before she finished reading it aloud. For one beautiful, weightless week, their future looked possible. Then, life remembered them. The call came on a Sunday. A road accident. Her parents, both of them, gone before the ambulance arrived. Amare flew home to bury them and came back carrying something broken inside her that no one could see, but everyone could feel. And then came the second blow, the one that knocked the air out of the room entirely. Debt. Hidden debt. Loans her father had taken out against the family property. Loans nobody knew about. The house she grew up in was seized, bank accounts frozen, insurance claims tied up in paperwork that would take years to resolve. In the space of 2 weeks, Amarae lost her parents, her home, her safety net, and the money she had been saving for her abroad program. The scholarship she had received covered tuition only. Without the living expenses fund, it meant nothing. She told no one how bad it was, not even Zyvion. She just went quiet, stopped returning calls, stopped eating properly, stopped showing up to the places she used to love. Zyvion noticed, he always noticed, but every time he asked, she said she was fine. She wasn't fine. That was how she ended up on the 3rd mainland bridge at 2 in the morning, standing on the wrong side of the railing, above the dark expanse of Lagos Lagoon, fingers slipping, wind tearing at the water, and Zyvion, who had followed her out of a gut feeling, a sick unease he couldn't name, who had run 3 blocks in the dark calling her name. Zyvion was the one who grabbed her hand and refused to let go. He held her for a long time after he pulled her over. Neither of them spoke. He just held her, and she sobbed into his chest, ugly, helpless, total sobs until she was emptied out and shaking. When she finally told him everything, sitting on the cold pavement of the bridge with the Lagos Lagoon below them and the city's distant skyline glowing above, he listened without interrupting. Every word, every number, every lost plan. And when he finished, he said quietly, "Your dream is not over." She shook her head. It was over. She knew exactly how much the program would cost. She had done the numbers 100 times. Without the living expenses fund, it meant nothing. What happened next was the kind of decision that defines a person. Not the easy ones, the ones made in the dark at a cost no one will ever see. Zyvion had one real asset. His father had left him a plot of land in Ikole, Ekiti, ancestral land that had been in the family for 2 generations, the kind of land that carries a name, a history, and a responsibility. Land that was supposed to be his foundation, the thing he would build a life on. He sold it. Then he went to 2 friends and borrowed money he had no realistic plan to repay. He cut his own expenses down to almost nothing. He calculated the exact amount Amarae would need for her first year abroad, rent, food, transport, and books, and he put it together. It took him 3 weeks. He handed her an envelope and said, "Go. Build the life you are supposed to have. I'll be here when you come back." Amarae looked at him for a long time before she took it. Something moved across her face. Something complicated. Gratitude, yes, but also something heavier. Something that looked almost like guilt. She should have listened to that feeling. Instead, she boarded the flight. The first 3 months were everything they had hoped for. She called every day. She sent photos of her campus at London South Bank University and her tiny student flat near Elephant and Castle, and the Tesco Express around the corner where everything cost too much, and she laughed about it anyway. She sent voice notes at midnight London time, telling him she missed him, that she was working hard, and that she was going to make this worth it for both of them. Zyvion played those voice notes on repeat. By month 4, the calls were shorter, busier. She said she was overwhelmed with coursework. He believed her. By month 6, she was calling once a week, then once a fortnight, then when she felt like it. He noticed the cooling. He told himself it was the time difference, the pressure, the adjustment. He had read that long distance was hard. He had prepared himself for the hard. What he hadn't prepared for was the message he received on an ordinary Tuesday evening. "Zyvion, I need you to hear this properly. I'm not coming back. I think we both need to move forward. Please don't make this harder than it has to be." He read it 4 times. Then he called. She picked up on the 3rd ring, voice calm, already practiced. "Zyvion, please don't do this." "Don't do what? I haven't done anything." His voice cracked on the last word. He hated himself for it. "I've changed. Things are different now. This isn't working." "You can tell me what changed. I'm listening. I'll always listen. You know you are all I have." Silence. Then, "Move on, Zyvion. I'm sorry." She hung up. He sat with his phone in his hand for a very long time. What followed was the worst year of his life, and he had already had several bad ones. The debts he had taken on to send her abroad came due. His friends, the ones he had borrowed from, needed their money back. He had no land to sell this time, no backup. He was drowning in arrears, surviving on credit, sleeping badly, and eating worse. The humiliation was layered. Not just the heartbreak, but the exposure of it. Surulere is a small world. People knew he had sold his father's Ekiti land for a woman who had now left him. He couldn't walk to the market on Bode Thomas Street without reading the pity in someone's eyes. And then one afternoon, the police came to his door. A debt collector had escalated a claim. He was brought in for questioning about unpaid loans. He was not charged, there was no crime, but he sat in that station for 6 hours, and by the time he walked out, something inside him had finished breaking and started setting like concrete. He made one phone call that evening to an uncle, his father's older brother who lived abroad and had never been particularly close. The man had sent a funeral wreath when Xavion's father died, and nothing else. Xavion had never called him before. He had too much pride for that. But pride is a luxury, and Xavion had run out of luxuries. The uncle answered. He listened, he didn't say much, but at the end he said, "Come, I'll handle the debts. Come and work with me." The debts were cleared within a month. Xavion packed what was left of his life into 2 bags and boarded a flight to Manchester. The irony was not lost on him. He was going to England, the same country Amare had gone to. Different city, different life, different version of himself. She was in London. He would be in Manchester. Less than 3 hours apart on a train neither of them knew existed between them. He arrived in Manchester and threw himself into work. His uncle ran a consulting firm off Deansgate and gave Xavion a position at the bottom with instructions to climb. Xavion climbed. He was methodical about it. He didn't socialize much. He didn't date. He built structure around himself like armor. Early mornings, clean habits, and focused hours. He saved money. He studied. He moved up. He became, in the way that people who have survived real loss became, very still, very calm, very difficult to read. He had not forgotten Amare, but he had filed her carefully, painfully, into the part of his life labeled lessons. He had no idea she was 90 minutes away on the Avanti West Coast line. The collision came on a Friday evening in his uncle's home in Dean Street, South Manchester. His uncle had been seeing someone for a few months, a woman based in London who made the trip up on weekends. He was careful about who he brought into his home and his life, so this was significant. He invited Xavion to join them for dinner. "Come meet her, she's special," the uncle said. Xavion arrived first, poured himself a glass of water and stood by the window. He heard the front door, he heard his uncle's voice, he heard heels on the floor. And then she walked into the room. Amare. She froze in the doorway like she had walked into a wall. The color drained from her face. Her hand went to her throat, a small involuntary gesture, the kind the body makes when the mind hasn't caught up. Xavion looked at her. His expression didn't change, not a flicker. The dinner was excruciating. Amare barely spoke. When she did, her voice was too bright, too careful. Xavion was composed, polite, and gave nothing away. His uncle noticed the strangeness between them, but said nothing. Later that night, after she had left, the uncle sat across from Xavion with a glass of whiskey and a question in his eyes. Xavion was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Uncle, don't trust that woman too much." The uncle raised an eyebrow. He had not expected this. His nephew was not a dramatic person. "What do you mean?" "I know her from before. I can't tell you everything tonight. Just be careful. Watch." The uncle laughed softly at first. He was a man of the world, not easily rattled. He had built a business on his ability to read people. But something in Xavion's eyes, that absolute stillness, that measured certainty, made him set down his glass and think twice. He started watching. He was discreet about it. He said nothing to Amare. He simply became more attentive to inconsistencies. A story that didn't quite match another story. Gaps in her schedule she couldn't account for. Names she mentioned once and never again. He had a private contact, a former colleague who had once worked in financial compliance. He asked a few quiet questions, passed along a few details. What came back surprised even him. Amare was not simply dating wealthy men on the side. That alone would have been enough to end things. But it was the other layer beneath it that made his stomach turn. Amare was a drug courier. Not the kind you picture on a street corner. The kind that networks specifically recruit educated young women with student visas, clean records, and respectable appearances who could move products across borders without raising a single eyebrow at customs. She had been doing it for almost 2 years, working a Lagos to London route that the National Crime Agency had been trying to crack for months. Heroin, mostly, packed into false-bottomed luggage and sometimes carried on the body itself through Heathrow Terminal 5. The older, wealthy foreign men the uncle had been noticing were not simply admirers. Some were clients. Some were handlers operating out of Peckham and Lewisham in South London. She had been recruited in her first year in London, when money was at its tightest. Someone had found her in the right moment, the way these networks always do, and made her an offer that felt in that desperate hour like a lifeline. She told herself it was temporary, just once, just enough to get stable. It was never just once. By the time the uncle's contact had finished putting the picture together, Amare was not on the fringes of the network. She was useful to it, known, trusted with larger consignment on the route between Lagos and London, sometimes rerouting through Amsterdam or Dublin to avoid pattern detection. The NCA had been building their case for months. They had names, they had routes, they had intercepted communications from both ends. What they had been missing were the final courier links, the faces that kept moving while the bigger players stayed invisible. Amare was one of those faces. She wasn't just dishonest, she was embedded. The uncle sat with this information for several days. He was not a vindictive man. He would have simply walked away, quietly, if it had been only about him. But he thought about what Zyvion had told him. About the land, the loans, the bridge, the year of debt and humiliation. He thought about his nephew sitting in a police station for 6 hours over money he had borrowed to send this woman to another country. And he made a decision. He didn't confront her. That would have given her time to run. Instead, he set a trap. He told her he had a contact, a new supplier moving product into the country who needed a trusted courier for one large consignment coming in from Lagos. No questions asked. The payout was significant. He framed it the way people in that world frame things, casually, in the language of someone who already knows. He watched her eyes process it, watched her weigh it, watched the mask slip just slightly as she decided. She agreed. Of course she agreed. The handover was set for a Thursday evening, a warehouse unit off the Trafford Park Industrial Estate in Manchester. Everything was arranged to look exactly like the transactions she had been running for 2 years. What she didn't know was that the uncle had already passed her name, her number, and everything the compliance contact had gathered to the National Crime Agency's Organized Crime Unit. The NCA had been waiting for a clean opportunity to move on the courier network without tipping off the handlers back in Lagos and South London. Amare walking willingly into a controlled handover in Manchester was precisely what they needed. Amare arrived at 7 o'clock looking like she always looked, composed, confident, that same walk, like she was already somewhere better. By 7:45, the room was full of people she had not invited. Officers, cameras, evidence bags, questions so specific, names, routes, deeds, consignments, that she understood in the first 60 seconds that this was not something she could talk her way out of. They knew things she had told no one. They had records she thought were untraceable. Every exit she reached for in her mind had already been closed. It unraveled quickly after that. It almost always does in the end. The legal process moved fast. Drug trafficking charges were filed under the Misuse of Drugs Act. Her student visa was revoked by the Home Office immediately. London South Bank University was notified. Within 72 hours, it was clear that she would not be staying in the country and that what came next would follow her name for a very long time. She was processed through Manchester Airport deportation suite with a one-way ticket and a single bag they had allowed her to pack. No luxury, no control, no power. Just a seat on a flight she hadn't chosen. She didn't see him until she was almost at the gate. Zyvion was standing near the departure board. He wasn't there by accident. He had known. She understood that the moment she saw him. He had known and he had come anyway. Not to gloat, not to argue, just to be there. in the way he had always been there, present, unshakable, bearing witness. She crossed the distance between them. Her eyes were already filling. Zyvion, he looked at her, calm, not cold, not angry, just settled in the way only people who have been through fire and come out the other side are settled. Zyvion, please, I made a mistake. I made so many mistakes. Tears were running freely now. She wasn't performing. This was real, and he could see it. The Amare on the other side of the journey had not entirely lost the woman she used to be. She knew, standing here, exactly what she had thrown away and exactly why she deserved this moment. He let her finish. Then, quietly, the way he had always spoken, measured and clear, he said, I gave you everything I had. My land, my money, my time, my name. I put myself in debt for years because I believed in you, and you treated all of it like it was nothing. She opened her mouth. He raised one hand gently, not unkindly. Now you know what it feels like to lose everything overnight, to have no control over what comes next. He held her gaze for a long moment. There was no cruelty in his eyes. There was no celebration. There was only the peace of a man who had stopped waiting for an apology that would have come too late to mean anything. He turned and walked away. He didn't look back. There is a kind of love that is so pure, so unconditional, that it becomes a target for people who have never learned to carry anything with care. Zyvion loved like that. He loved without calculation, without condition, without ceiling. He believed in Amare the way some people believe in things they can't see, completely, foolishly, magnificently. And she took that love and handed it back to him in pieces. But here is what betrayal cannot take, no matter how total it is. It cannot take who you are when you rebuild. It cannot take the version of you that survives the worst of it and comes out harder, wiser, and more whole. Zyvion walked out of that airport the same man he had always been, just quieter, just cleaner, just free. Amare got on her flight and went back to a life she had burned to the ground. Some betrayals don't just break hearts, they destroy destinies. And sometimes, if you're lucky, losing everything is the only thing that teaches you what everything was actually worth. Thanks for listening. Subscribe for more stories. See you in the next story.